Now, Tony, you and I grew up in Mayfair, so it's kind of significant to us that today they're doing, on the anniversary of the Operation Clean Sweep initiative, the county is returning to the Mayfair Oakcrest area. I particularly am interested in seeing, having driven around the neighborhood this morning and seeing a lot of the places that I remember from my childhood. What about you?
Yeah, the neighborhood seems smaller than it used to when we were kids.
The road certainly seemed
Very
narrower.
But while it's an expansive neighborhood, it's not as expansive as you remember. It seems
Right,
a little more compact than you remember.
right,
Uh, we're coming up to an area where we used to play football every afternoon at 5 o'clock
right.
or 4 o'clock. We'd play in the street. Sidewalks were out of bounds. Telephone poles
Right.
were goals.
And the thing is too, back in those days, or at least in my childhood, the roads hadn't yet been paved over, and they were that really hard, rocky surface.
Like gravel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even though it was asphalt, it was the hard rocks that stuck out, and you had to be really, really tough if you wanted to play in the street in your bare feet. One of the things that strikes me about the neighborhood, which I have such fond memories of, is we keep the police scanner on all the time in the newsroom, and on a daily basis we hear calls from the streets of my childhood, and it can get a little depressing sometimes, but which is another reason why it's heartening to see the county taking such initiatives in the neighborhood.
Right. That is kind of sad. It is kind of sad when you come through and you see the overgrowth in places where you went as a child, friend's house, that have no semblance whatsoever of what you remember.
Right.
Or houses that have been burned down and are now gone.
Right.
That's kind of sad, kind of a little disheartening.
On the other hand, there are places that in the neighborhood that look just as nice as I remember 30,
Exactly.
40 years ago.
Exactly.
And like, for instance, your family still lives in the neighborhood.
Right.
And, and the house looks great. And now this is the section of New Mexico Drive in which I grew up. And like you said, it is a little bit more overgrown.
And it is vastly different from when we grew up in here.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, there were no mailboxes on the side of the street when we were young, but and there doesn't seem to be. I mean, when we were kids, it seemed like there were always kids out. Where now it seems like it's harder to find someone actually out and about.
Right. There were always kids.
There was always somebody doing something.
And I see the houses here in my street of my best friends, the houses I hung out in and spent about as much time as I did at my own house.
The flashes of memory.
Yeah.
Where you're going, my parents only knew.
Yeah. And actually, my wife and I and our kids came back to live in this neighborhood later after I was an adult. So I've had I did a couple of tours of duty in the Mayfair subdivision.
Well, that was a great place to grow up, though. I mean,
It really was.
it was definitely a fun place to grow up.